Hi everybody, it's Tuesday and it's time to sew again. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to start the series on sewing machine feet. So we're going to go through all the different types of machine feet that came with our machine and some other ones that didn't come with the machine. We're going to be working on the Destiny mostly. I mean, all the machines sew really well. Even our lowest priced machine sews beautifully. And they all sew the basic stitches very well. So, you know, what I cover on this fancy machine will work just as well on the just your basic machines as well. So let's get into our sewing feet. I'm trying to get to the general purpose foot, which is also known as the J foot. We're going to start with this one, which is the J foot, or the general purpose foot. And just let's take a good look at this foot. What does it do? Just basic stuff, nothing really fancy, but it does a lot of the stitches. Remember, whenever you're sewing, for most of the baby locks and the brothers, it will tell you on the screen what foot to use for general purposes most of the time. So we're just going to take a good look at this foot. When you take the foot off, here's something I want you to look at. I want you to, every once in a while, especially after you've done a lot of sewing, I'm not talking about embroidery or decorative stitches because you're using a different foot, but if you're doing regular sewing, take a look at the bottom of it. Let's see if I can get a good picture on that. It should be smooth. It shouldn't have any gouges, and because that's telling me it can have scratches. That's not a big deal. This is, see it, you can see some scratches right here. You'll see where because that's where the okay, so you see this, you can see the glare. Just so I get it just right, see those scratches? That's normal. That's okay. That's from the metal feed dogs hitting the bottom of the foot. Especially us quilters. Us quilters sort of sew we sew at the edge. We stick the fabric right up under the needle and start sewing, and then we sew off. So there's a few seconds there where feed dogs are sort of touching the back of the plate, the foot, and that's okay. You know, it's okay. But if you have scratches, what I want you to look for is make sure that you have scratches even. Let's see if I can show them there. There, you can see the scratches. You want to make sure there's scratches evenly across. What things I don't want to see is I don't want to see brass showing through. I want to see it silver, because if brass is showing through, that's going to start sticking to your fabric, and now you're not hitting, your feed dogs aren't hitting the foot properly, you know, or they're too worn. And now if it's across all four or all three scratch marks, that's okay. If you've got gouges, just replace the foot. It's a cheap little foot and you can replace it easily. If you have scratches on one side or gouges on one side and nothing on the other, or deep gouges on one side and nothing on the other, that's telling me that this foot is not sitting flat on those feed dogs. One of two things is wrong when you see that. Either you have got thread. Well, here, let's look at the machine. I'll show you. Okay, let me take off feed dogs. I am going to remove this plate. And where's my... this is what I want. Oh, I gotta take this foot off. Come to think of it. So if you remove this, and I'm going to put this way, and so those don't come off. I'm notorious for losing those screws. So I'm going to if you have, this doesn't hurt. Goodness, it's dirty. I'm taking this off. Remember those scratches? Here's the feed dogs right here. And if this is not sitting flat on there, it can scratch it. It'll scratch on one side and not the other, because these are, if you touch them, these are sharp little things. You know, they can scratch you. So it doesn't hurt every once in a while to brush these out. Get an old toothbrush sometimes will help clean these out really well. But like I said, if you've got it on one side and not the other, check around these screws right here. Just look around. Make sure there is not thread stuck up underneath there that's made this push up. See how that goes up and down? But sometimes threads and lint can get up underneath of these screws and causing it not to be straight. So that's one place you should check that your feed dogs are right. You could also get that, maybe not feed dog wearing unevenly. It could be that your fabric is feeling like it's wanting to twist as it goes underneath the feed dogs. That could also mean that there's lint in here. That could be one thing too. Okay. Now that is the most common problem when you're getting scratching on one side of your feed dog. That's the most common thing that goes wrong. Another thing that can go wrong is there is something going on with the presser foot here, and it's not pushing down evenly, or it could be off, and that is something that the technician has to take care of. Okay, so anyway, whenever I'm putting this back together, it's so easy to put this back in here with that plate off and then put it back together. I can guarantee you it won't work. This is the last thing that goes in. It has to be put back together in reverse order of how you took it apart. So this is the last thing off. It's the first thing to go back on. And I don't want to lose the screws. See, that general purpose foot can tell you a lot about what's going on with the operation of your machine. Plus, it's a fun foot to use. You could actually, that same scratching can go on with, this is the 1/4 inch foot. So this is the 1/4 inch foot with guide, and see how the back of it is shiny. You can also see the scratches on it. So if this is a foot you use most of the time, then that's okay. Okay, let me screw this back down. So you put this back in. And tighten it down. That's good. I don't tighten it He-Man tight like Justin does. Put the bobbin case back in, and remember we have 2 of them. This one has a dot in the middle, plus this set screw right here is silver. This means this is for embroidery. This is for pre-wound bobbins, and I'm not going to use it. The tension is set a little tighter for that really, really thin thread. Now I'm going to use this one for sewing. They're identical except for the painting things and what the tension is set at. And this one, see, the screw is green. It's painted green once it's set. And that's set for regular sewing thread. So that's for regular sewing stuff. So I might as well use the correct one. Oh, in case you didn't see how I did that, there's a little triangle right there. There's a little dot right here. You match up the dot to the triangle. Slips right in. And then I'm going to put this 2-piece back. And everything's back to normal. What I should have done, and I did not do, because I never do it, but you should, because the book says so. See this? Before I did that, playing around with that thing, with the bobbin case, I should have hit this. And that, it's going to lower the presser foot. Plus it blocks this and all the buttons out so that I don't impale my finger on the needle. So I will leave it off while we're dinkering around with this, okay? So I'm going to put the ankle on. And again, it just screws in. Okay? I'm going to tighten it with the screwdriver. That's a good way to break a needle, is when your feet come loose while you're sewing. It's not a good thing. Okay. Let's take a look here. We have some marks on here. Let's go look at the marks on the foot. Okay, we have some marks here. See, there's a line here, and then there's an opening in the plastic and a line here. This is in front of the needle, which the needle plate is here, and it's got a wide spot, wide place right here, so you've got lots of room for your needles. This is your center needle position, this is your left needle position, this is your right needle position, and you have like 16 different ones, so you're not just restricted to those 3. But what those are good for is where you're checking out your stitching. Okay, so let's go, and then I'm going to raise the presser foot. Okay, another thing that's on here, and of course it's telling you that it's a J foot right there, is this thing. And I'll show you what that's for. It's called a leveling pin, and I'll show you in a second. It's easier to show you than tell you. Okay. And I'm going to hit that button again to release everything. Okay. With the baby locks and the Brothers and most other machines nowadays, that when you select a stitch, it's going to tell you what foot to use. Such as if I pick this one, it says to use the end foot. Or if I pick that one, it's saying J foot. It's picks overcasting stitches telling you to use the G foot. I'm going to go to this general purpose foot, and this is a straight stitch on the left needle. This one is straight stitch center needle. Nope, that's left needle too. Okay, both of these say straight stitch left needle. The difference is over this one. If you look at the top really close, you can see a dash that looks like a quotes at the very top, and this one has a dot at the very top. Those 2 stitches are identical, with the exception of the fact that number 1, when you hit the reverse key, number 1 goes backwards. When you hit the reverse key using 102, it just does what they call a lock stitch, which is 3 stitches in one place, so it makes a little knot on the back. Same thing with 3 and 4. Those all have 3 is now your center stitch, and then other things we can use that J foot to is anything that says P, so this 1-30, and let's stitch something. Okay. When we stitch with this one, if say this is the end of my fabric and I am using the 01 or the 101 or 102, when my needle is in left needle position, which is 01 and 02, my stitch width is 0. That is 1/2 inch between here and here. When I'm sewing knits and things, I use a 1/2 inch seam. So guess what? There's my instant guide. So I can sew a 1/2 inch. I like to start with my thread underneath the foot, and you don't have to hold on to it. And I'm just going to sew, and that's going to give me a 1/2 inch seam. I'm going too fast here. And that's too slow. There we go. And that gives you a nice, I'm going to hit the scissor. Here's your nice seam. Okay. I read the other day that if you get laddering, which means that the stitches are sort of slanted a little bit, that can be the fact that your needle is too big for your thread. Such as if you're using a really fine 60 weight lingerie thread or bottom line thread and you're getting that laddering, and that's because with that thread you should be using a size 9 or a size 10 needle with it. So that's one thing to look for too. This is nice and straight. If you're not getting a straight stitch, again, check to make sure you've got the correct needle size. And is it as perfect as the Singer Featherweight? Pretty close. Because that's the gold standard. Everybody knows that the Singer Featherweight makes the very most perfect straight stitch, which is why quilters covet them. So like I'm going to select number 3. I'm going to use the same reference point. When I'm using number 1.03 is center needle position, which means if you're looking at the width on your machine, the stitch width, because a straight stitch doesn't have a width, so when you're doing a straight stitch, the width setting, which is stitch width, stitch length, and the tension and all that. If you're at 3.5, that's your center needle position. And I believe that is 3/8 of an inch. And again, I like to start. See, if I start with my threads underneath, and I'm starting at the exact same spot, and you'll see where that one's going to go. A little faster. When I'm doing like twin needle work, well, not really twin needle. Twin needle work, I usually use center needle position and just run 2 threads through the needles. The other thing, sometimes I don't like what happens with a double needle, because then you get that zigzag on the back, and I don't like that because a lot of time it tunnels up. So whenever I want a true parallel stitch, I have to do 2 passes, and that way I usually use the exact same reference point, but I use 2 needle positions to achieve the same thing. Okay, now the one that I like is this 130. It is, you'll see a P by it. See, 130 has a P, and there's a few of them that have that. This one has it. This is your center needle position. They call it a piecing stitch, and this is left needle position, but mostly we use this one. It can be found in a few places. It can be found in menu 5. Not 5, the Q one, because there's the same stitch. The middle one, that's the same one as the 131. I hardly ever use that. I usually use this one. It's the same stitch, identical. All the settings are exactly the same. Okay, say we're doing a 1/4 inch. Instead of doing 2 pieces, I'll do a 1/4 inch. There's my 1/4 inch. Now, this is not quite as good as a 1/4 inch foot. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, here we go. So as I'm using this edge as my guide, I can use a 1/4 inch foot. I could also do this. Use my center needle position and use this guide, because over here, see that 1/4 inch guide? So if I use that guide, I also get a 1/4 inch. That looks bigger than a 1/4 inch. Where is my seam gauge? Okay, let's measure these and see. Nope, it is a 1/4 inch. See that? That one is a 1/4 inch. And actually, when it's on P, it's a scant 1/4 inch. And see, it's just a hair inside the 1/4 inch. And most of the time, that's what we use as a scant 1/4 inch, because by the time you fold your fabric and you've made your seam, this rollover of the fabric actually adds. So like if there it is. If I roll it over and I press it, I now have an accurate 1/4 inch here. And that's just turning it around. 5/8 inch stitching, should the needle be the left? Yeah, I would. 5/8 is a little tricky. It's not my favorite to use, because 5/8 from the left edge, see how this mark is over here? That's like completely useless. I usually you can use center needle, and I'll just mark it from the 1 inch. To be honest with you, for 5/8, I would use center needle position. Let me get another piece of fabric and use this foot with the markings on it, because this one right here is your 1/4 inch. if you're using left needle position, you've got to use this line way back there. If your fabric is right here, and you're looking back here, well, your needle's over here. If you're adjusting for back here, you already missed the boat. It's best to be looking ahead. So if you're using center needle position, use this mark. It's ahead of the needle, so therefore, right there, it's going to give you a 5/8. Well, let's use that. Now I'm not using, now we have the laser line. We have the laser pointers, and we're not quite talking about that today. But you can use your laser pointer for the same thing. Okay, you can set your needle, take your measurement, and set your laser over here as your guide. So which would be like that. Right now it's set in front of the needle, but I can move this over. That's the outer limit of my laser, and I'm going to move that needle back to 0. Okay, yep. So there's my 5/8 right there, where I've got this laser, but this is also with left needle position. I'm going to turn that laser off. But I think using, there's the place. Here's this, and I don't need to have my laser on. So just following that, and it's right on the money. See, that's right on the money. Okay, you got one. Now this is the 1/4 inch, one of the 1/4 inch feet. I got a couple of different kinds of 1/4 inch feet, and so we have 2 of them here. This one has got the 1/4 inch foot with the guide. And there was another one that had a guide to it, but I don't know what I did with it because I didn't like it. I probably gave it away. Which was, this is the normal 1/4 inch foot that I like. This is my favorite one. I'm not crazy about the guide. I can miss the guide just as easily as I can miss the marks on the plate. So to me, I don't find it any more helpful. And it's got a very short little round hole, so you have to use center needle position with this. And this, take this out. And this one, okay. You have little marks. Let me take that off and show you what these little marks do. Let's see if we can get a good. Okay, so here, these marks right here go across are even with the needle. So if you are, let's put this right here, if you're going to put your fabric right there, that's where your needle is. Okay, this in front of it is 1/8 in front of the needle. This is 1/8 behind the needle. This is 1/4 inch in front of the needle. So if you are sewing and you want to pivot a corner, like if you're doing a binding, you're going to sew, 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 sew. I'm using this as my guide. Now, there's two. Here's one of the reasons I like this one is versus the other one. This one doesn't have a guide. I sew 1/4 inch seams, but I like 3/8 for my binding. Because if I sew, I cut my binding when I'm doing a quilt 2 1/8 inches. If I sew my binding on using a 1/4 inch, what happens is it wraps to the back and it wraps too far, like over here. Like, where's the one I did with the 1/4 inch? Well, I lost it already. So, it'll wrap too far to the back, but if I then use that 2 1/8 and use 3/8 as my guide for the binding, then it fits perfectly and I don't have to stuff the binding, which is cheating. So anyway, what this does is that if you're, let me put it this way so you can see this better. If your fabric, you're getting ready to turn a corner, say you're using this right here and you're right there. If you pivot right there, you stop your needle exactly there and your fabric is right here, that's going to give you a perfect 1/4 inch behind it. So, little tiny stitch, just a little bit. That's almost a 1/2 a stitch. Okay, then I stop with where my fabric is right here. Then I can pivot, and I don't have pivoting turned on, and now that should be right close to it. And then I sew this way. Okay, that gives me a 1/4 inch on both sides, which is good for putting binding on. Like I said, I like my binding instead to be, which is just a tie. I use that as my guide, and this is where I would sew my binding. And to me, that gives me the perfect width to bind. I'll show you, where did I, yeah, I did a quilt. And let me show you what it looks like with the binding. For a part we can see right here. Okay, I sewed this top on using 3/8. It's a tiny bit wider than a 1/4 of an inch, but that batting fills it totally. I find that because I like my back to be exactly the same as the front, so I would have my stitching line, and when I sew it on, I'm just going to sew the back literally right over top of the stitching line, is literally underneath here. So my front and my back are exactly the same width. If you use a 1/4 of an inch, you end up with a little tiny quilt border here, binding border. It's only a 1/4 one, and you got all this excess back here, and it usually sticks out to about right there, and it looks terrible. It has the same marks, and the marks are even more prominent. And if you slightly miss, you have more room. You've got a bigger opening right here. It's bigger than, let's take this one off. This one is bigger than this one. See? And this has got a little tiny hole. This one's bigger. So therefore, you don't have to be exactly in center. You can, if you need a scant 1/4 inch or a generous 1/4 inch, you can move your needle and not worrying about hitting metal. And your lines are bigger. You have much bigger lines to see here than these little teeny nubs. The other thing is that this one has a guide. This isn't square at the end. There is another 1/4 inch foot with guide that looks exactly like this one, but it has a guide plate right here, and it's square, and it jams on the fabric, especially on the quilting when you're putting on binding, because it's kind of squishy, and that guide digs into the fabric and gets caught a lot. So I don't like that one at all. I like this one where it's rounded, and therefore if you've got any kind of thickness, it'll ride up on it, and it's got a little spring. So that's why I like that one. Now, what are these leveling pins for? Okay, leveling pins are really good when you've got differences in thicknesses of fabric, like doing jeans. And it's on this one too. I've never used it on the 1/4 inch, but you could if you had to. Say you're sewing over a hem. Okay, this is when it's mostly like, let's make a flat fell seam. I'm going to make a flat fell seam. Whoops, missed totally. I thought I was in left needle position. I'm not. I didn't say it had to be straight. I'll go left. It's not really a flat fell seam, but you get the idea. Essentially it is. You got 3 thicknesses of fabric. And guess what? You go to hem them. Now I've got real thickness going on here. Big lump. This essentially is what we call they used to call them a hump jumper, but it's a leveler. So you would start, so what would happen, and I'm going to take the thread out because I don't want it to sew. What would happen is that, and I'm going to go real slow, is that you would, as you go up higher, see how the pin goes up in the air? And you have to be very careful because this, if it's really thick, this will go up so high that the needle is going to hit metal. And when it comes off, See, it'll drop down. And see, again, when it drops down, this can hit metal again. And I don't want to chance it, so. And you'd end up breaking a needle. And I'm sure we've all done that. Because I know I have. I know you're out of thread. She's smarter than I am. Okay. So, you would say we're sewing a jeans hem to work. Well, here, let's make a hem. Okay, we're sewing these jeans. Okay. Okay, we need to make this hem. And as you sew, as soon as you see it start to rise, raise the presser foot, push in the button, lower the presser foot. Oh. I did lower the presser foot. Oh, I did it by hand, that's why. See, that button is staying in. It's not coming out, and it's going to sew. Oh, and it stayed until it got level, and as it goes down again, if you're having trouble with it, lower it, and it'll pop off as soon as it's level again. And that way you're not going to run the risk or breaking your needle. And see, that really sewed over it really well. And sometimes we have trouble sewing in the opposite direction, so let's see what happens. Okay, it's starting to go up. Okay, and I'm going to raise this, pull it down, it's going to stay, and then as I go down, it released. And I didn't break a needle. That's what the leveling pin does. And it works very well, and no needles are broken. And that has sewn through one, right in this little section right here, there's 9 layers of denim. There's 3 here, 3 here, 3 underneath. So this thing, you saw how easily it sewed through 9 layers of denim. So it works really well. So let's see, is that all I have for the leveling pin? For the general purpose feet? That's about it. But now hopefully you've learned a little bit about even the simplest, most basic of the feet that we have, which is that general purpose foot. And we talked about the 1/4 inch foot. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so that's all I have for you. See you later. You guys have a great week and stay healthy. Bye-bye, guys.